So today, we're going to dig into a pretty provocative theory. It comes from a source called The Erosion of Civilizations and the Rise of Islamization. We're going to walk through its main claim, that there's an ongoing war of Islamization that is actively wiping out other cultures. Let's break down how this argument is built, piece by piece.
Right out of the gate, the source makes this incredibly bold and, you could say, sweeping claim. The cultures of America and Iran have perished hundreds of years ago. This is the statement that really sets the stage for everything that follows. It's the whole foundation, this idea of complete cultural death.
All right, first up, let's unpack the core idea here, what the source is calling cultural erosion.
So at the very heart of this argument is one big idea, that there's an ongoing war of Islamization. And according to the source, this is what's responsible for destroying non-Islamic cultures, not just in the past, but right now, today. This is the central claim that the rest of the material is all designed to prove.
Okay, so to back this up, the source then turns to history, focusing on two big case studies, Iran and the Americas.
Now here's where it gets interesting. To build its case, the source draws a direct line between two events that are separated by, almost 1,000 years. On one side, you have the Arab invasion of Iran back around 650 AD, and on the other, the arrival of Europeans in the Americas in the 15th century. The argument here is that even with that huge time gap, these events followed the exact same destructive pattern.
And this slide is where the source lays that comparison out side by side. For Iran, on the left, it claims the entire culture was totally replaced by the Quran in just 50 years. Then, it equates that to what happened in the Americas, the total destruction of the Maya, Aztec, and Inca cultures, pointing to the killing of millions and the loss of their land and rights.
And to really hammer this point home, the source uses some incredibly strong language about the European legacy in the Americas. It says the white people who rule the country are the children of robbers, murderers, and colonizers from Europe. It presents this quote as sort of the final verdict on the colonization it's describing.
Okay, so from these historical examples, the argument then jumps forward to the present day, and it hones in specifically on India.
The source presents this number, 25%, and claims this is the percentage of India's population that has been converted. Then it argues that for this group, their original culture has perished. You can see how it's directly connecting this idea back to what it said happened in Iran and the Americas.
And this is a really crucial point the source makes. This isn't framed as something that happened way back when and is now over. No, the way they depict it, this is an active, ongoing process, a wave that is still rolling forward. The text is explicit. This war of Islamization is not stopping.
So you might be asking, how can they call this an ongoing war? Well, to justify that, the source does something very specific. It redefines a key term, and that brings us to its expanded definition of jihad.
Now, you really have to get this next part, because it's absolutely central to the whole argument. The source presents jihad as something much broader than just violent acts. It's described here as a whole spectrum of social and cultural efforts, all, according to the source, aimed at converting people and changing a society's core values. This is how the idea of a war is expanded to include a lot of nonviolent fronts.
So, to illustrate what it means, the source gives these specific examples. It's not just one thing. They point to violent acts, sure, like a doctor planting a bomb. But then also things happening in the corporate world, alleging officials tried to convert people. Then it moves to cultural influence, through things like education and Bollywood. And it even brings it down to the level of personal relationships, giving the example of a boy calling a girl a commodity.
And that brings us to the end. But the source doesn't just wrap things up with a neat statement. Instead, it throws out a final challenge, a question for the audience.
Remember that last example, the boy calling a girl a commodity? Well, the source circles right back to that, and it provides its own very specific, very loaded definition for that word. It claims it means the wealth stolen from the disbelievers and their daughters. This definition is used to give a much more sinister meaning to what might otherwise sound like a simple insult.
So, with that final definition in mind, the source concludes by putting this question directly to its audience. How to stop this war of Islamization? It doesn't give an answer. It just leaves that question hanging there, leaving the viewer to think about everything it's just presented. And that concludes our breakdown of this particular theory.